I think you've been taught to learn in the wrong way. When I was 6, I started my first math Olympiad competition class, not because I was good at math or even liked math, but for extra credits in the Gaokao, China's college entrance exam, which is also known as one of the toughest exams in the world. At 17, I transferred to a military-style boarding school. We studied 14 hours a day. Every morning, we would get up at 6 a.m. in the morning, and then we'll run half a mile together, and then we'll study until 10:30 p.m. There were no weekends, and we can only go home once every 40 days. Just in 1 year, I took over 200 exams. At the end of the year, we followed the brutal cycle of taking 2 days of exams, studying for 1 day, and then take another exam for 2 days. Despite all that, I actually didn't get into my dream college in China, so I decided to study abroad, and I went to a liberal art college first. And after a couple years of quizzes, exams, and essays where always get straight A's, I finally applied and got into Columbia University, which is my dream school and where I got rewarded for more quizzes and exams. Hi, welcome to my channel. My name's Han. As someone who spent nearly her entire life in education, the single most valuable skill I developed is how to learn more efficiently. I've also done extensive research on this topic, and in this video, I'm going to share all that with you. Before I dive in, I want to clarify that what I'm going to share with you is not just a shortcut or a trick to get better grades on your exams without putting in any time or effort. The way I think about it, it's more like, oh, say if you want to travel 100 miles, walking would take more than 40 hours, but driving only takes about an hour and 40 minutes. The right tool makes all the difference. In fact, research has shown that people only can do about 4 hours of deep work each day, and for maximum of productivity, we shouldn't work for more than 7 2-point hours a day. So I believe the idea of good grades only come from really long hours of time and effort is a myth. How we study matters way more than how long we studied. So now let's actually get into my study system. There are broadly 2 parts, learning and revision. So the way I learn a brand new concept is quite different from how we traditionally taught in school or presented in textbooks. I start with the big pictures and core basics and then dive into the details later. Let me explain this. I've always wondered why I sometimes learn way more from a 15 minutes YouTube videos than like an hour and a half lectures taught by my Ivy League degree professor. Well, the short answer is probably the YouTube videos just explain things better. But after digging a little bit deeper, I actually come to this conclusion of why this happens. Lectures usually present concepts or subjects in order. They will cover every single details around this topic or even complicated variations, no matter whether they're important or not, before they moving on to the next subject. While YouTube videos are usually quite the opposite. Each video only provides the core basics. There's no fluff. It's just everything that you needed to know for the basics. And if you want to learn more details or more advanced materials, there's usually a separate videos for that. So the way I learn is that I will start with the big picture. I will kind of ask myself, what am I learning? What is this thing about? I will try to use one sentence or like the simplest language to summarize and describe what I'm learning. For example, for linear programming, it's about finding the maximum and minimum values. So you may have no idea what linear programming is, but we can have a very, very basic understanding of what this thing is. Kind of in my mind, there is immediately a familiarity. If I ever get lost in the details, I can always come back. After that very quick first step, now I will actually start learning all the core basics, the backbone of everything. The way I do this sometimes is that I can look up the table of content, or they're usually like subsections or headlines, and I will try to use those as my structures to try to understand each of those topics on a very basic level. For example, for linear programming, I have this table of content, and I will just start going through this list and ask myself questions like, what is the definition of linear programming? What are the basic components of linear programming? And I will try to answer those questions by like either looking up a textbooks or just found it online yourself, and try to answer it in a very simple language. There's the 80-20 rules, means 80% of the results come from 20% of effort, and those important 20% are usually the core basics. And then I will move on to learning more details and in-depth materials, and not just because of the 80-20 rules, but also because I'm already familiar with the topic and I have a foundation in my mind. It's gonna be easier for me to make connections based on those fundamental concepts and understand the more complex information faster. Now for the second part, revision. After being exposed to the materials or like learn it once, I never reread or re-watching the lectures again. Because mastering information and make it stick to your mind is not about how many times you're being exposed to the material. It's about being exposed to it once, and then you can test yourself and recall that information from your mind. Testing as a learning tool is what actually leads to long-term memory and the mastery of a specific topic. I'm actually really surprised to learn this data is that after we learn the material, testing it once actually improved the correctness of that information by 50%. There are so many amazing apps out there that can help you do this. And I recently actually discovered this app called Thea Study. It's completely for free, and honestly, hands down, I think it's one of the best learning tool out there. They actually not only have flashcards, but also have games that also use active recall. You can use Thea to study any subjects, like even math. To get started, you create a study kit and input the subject you're studying. As you can see, the Smart Study feature can just generate a bunch of questions for you to answer. They also have detailed explanations. There's another feature that can help you create a study guide. So this feature is just so useful because before sometimes I create my own study guide, and this just will save me tons of time. They also have this mock test feature so you can understand your pace, which will be so helpful during your actual exam and can also just help out with test anxiety. I really wish I have had this when I was in high school or college. It basically incorporated all the strategies and science-based techniques that I talked about in this video. So I really recommend you to check it out. It's completely for free right now, and I genuinely think it will be so helpful in your studying. The link is in my description, and thank you so much, Thea, for sponsoring this video. And back to testing is best learning tool. Funny thing is that actually students that do more passive learning, which is like rereading or like rewatching or like highlighting, copying notes, those students actually feel more confident before their exams compared to the students that do more testing and know like rereading the materials. Those students actually don't feel as confident because they tested themselves and sometimes they get things wrong and they're like, oh, I'm actually not ready. But the results are exactly the opposite. So testing is really the best way to learn. Please don't waste any time on passive learning, even though they may make you feel good. And in terms of when to review the material, and when I say review, I mean like testing. I usually do the same day or relatively soon after I learn the material. This is also research-backed, as we take two groups of students and exposed them to the same material, but one group of students reviewed it the same day they learned the material, and the other group reviewed the material the day before their assessment test. And it's very surprising that even though the second group reviewed the material right before their exam, you would think, you know, like the memory is the freshest, like, you know, it's the next day. The first group performed way better. So the best time to review your material is relatively soon after you learned it the first time. This is why homework is actually very effective in our ideal learning system. So in the ideal world, my ideal optimized learning system is like this. I understand almost everything from the lecture, start with the core basics, and then dive into details. And if I have questions, I will ask them, and they should be answered pretty quickly. Then the same day or like the day after I learn the material, I will do homeworks or assignments or like some self-testing to help me put what I learned into practice. And before the exam, I will review everything and then do like more mock testing. It's not possible to always have the best teachers. But this system also works really well if you're just like teaching yourself for most of the things. And the key to be more consistent is really have a plan and make studying as easy, as enjoyable as possible, which I actually have a whole video on how to make studying more enjoyable here if you want to check that out. At the end of the video, I actually want to adore Thea one more time. As I mentioned earlier in the video, I'm genuinely very impressed with Thea. They're incorporating all the techniques and strategies that I talked about in this video and have all the features in one place, which just helps students to study more efficiently. I also really appreciate the fact that they are using technology to make education more accessible, as they're completely for free right now. So definitely check them out. I really hope this video is helpful, and thank you for watching to this point. I hope you have a wonderful day, and I will see you next time. Bye-bye.